This is TJ with Tech Made Easy. Welcome to the channel. I'm all about making things affordable, practical, and mostly easy. And this is going to be one of the most easy ways to set up a remote desktop that allows you to access your home computer or an office computer through the internet. There's no configuring of your router. That's one of the hard parts about when you do, as soon as you go outside of your house and you want to enter your house from the internet. It depends on the tools that you use. You know, you can use, there's some remote desktops out there like Google remote desktop that you don't have to do anything with your router, and some other ones. But this one also, you don't have to do anything with your router, but it's a lot more flexible. And it's easy to set up, easy to use. It's an awesome product. So let's get started. This is TJ with Tech Made Easy. Welcome to the channel. Today what we're going to be doing, this is part 2 of my remote desktop. In my first remote desktop, I was just showing you how to remote desktop to any computer in your house. But this, what we're going to do here is part 2 is how we're going to remote desktop to a computer in our house from our laptop from the internet. So in this presentation, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using this laptop. It's a little beat up. It's our family laptop. Of course, my wife has the nicest laptop, but we're going to be remote desktop into this desktop here through the internet, through the laptop. Now, what we're going to be doing here is in my first video, I went over Windows Remote Desktop, which is only available in Windows Pro 10. Windows 10 Pro. So then we're going to be talking about another one that I went in over my first one, and that's NoMachine Remote Desktop. The advantage of NoMachine Remote Desktop, it works with almost all operating systems: Mac, Linux, Raspberry Pi, Windows, and Android. And so you can use its remote desktop from any of those applications, and you can go from a Windows to a Linux, from Windows to a Linux desktop, from Linux to Windows, to Mac to Windows, whatever you want to do. It's just, so it's really flexible, it's super easy to set up. Go to my first video, it shows you how to set up all these and use them. In this one, I'm just going to be introducing them to you. I'm not going to go into them in any depth at all. I'm just using them as tools so that we can remote desktop through the internet. Now, all the tools that we're going to be using are free. NoMachine is free. And there are other ways to remote desktop into computers. You could use Google's remote desktop is pretty good. There's TeamViewer. I believe TeamViewer, you have to pay for that one. If I'm wrong, sorry. It's been a while since I looked at it. But so those are some really popular ones right there. Now, the reason why I don't use a Google desktop is because I already use NoMachine, because I do have I do access a couple of machines using NoMachine in my house, and I don't want to have to use Google desktop to remote desktop from the internet. And not only that, the setup of this is no more complicated than setting up a Google remote desktop, but it is a lot more flexible. If you have a server, you can set it up this way. You don't have to touch your router. There's no port forwarding or anything like this. This software or service that you're going to use, which is free, it basically works as a router for your local area network. So you don't have to touch anything. You just set up and you'll see as we set this up, it's really a cool piece of service. I wish I had known about this 2 years ago, because it would have made it easier for me to do a server in my house. But at any rate, let's just go ahead and get started, jump on the desktop, and let's get started with ZeroTier. It's a great product, great service, easy to use and set up. So let's get going. Thanks. As I mentioned before in the introduction, there are many ways to remote access from the internet to your house. I like this way personally because you can use whatever remote desktop software you want to use. One of the most popular ones obviously is Windows 10's remote desktop, but it's only available in Windows 10 Pro. And so I'm going to show those real quick, but I have a more in-depth video on those. This is really part 2 of remote desktop, because this is remote desktop from outside your home. But really quick, so the first one
I basically showed how to use two different remote desktops. One that's built into Windows 10 Pro, and then the other one is NoMachine. In fact, I'm just going to pull this up here. NoMachine can access all these different operating systems: Linux, the Raspberry Pi, Mac, Windows, Android. So it's very flexible. And that's why I use NoMachine, because I have a mix of operating systems in my house, mostly between Windows and Linux. We're going to be using both of these. So here's Microsoft's remote desktop. And again, I'm not going into this in detail at all. If you want to watch that video, watch the first one. It shows you how to activate this and how to set it up. It's real easy to set up. But right now I'm on my laptop. It's our family laptop. It's not the most powerful laptop in the world, but it'll do for what we're doing here. So what I'm using this is I'm remote desktoping, or I'm using Microsoft's remote desktop to go to my PC. So this is one of the PCs I have in the house here. And so now, so here's my laptop, desktop, and now I've remote. So now again, I'm on one of my desktop computers using Windows Remote Desktop. I just want to show this real quick because we are going to be using it. But then on the other hand, if you're using any Windows version home, whether it's 7, 8, 10, it doesn't come with Windows Remote Desktop. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm going over another desktop here. And again, I go over this in more detail in my other video. I'm just introducing them to you here because these are the two remote desktops they're going to be using. The other one is NoMachine. Now, NoMachine is really simply set up. It finds all your machines that are running NoMachine on it, and all you have to do, I'm just going to go ahead and go into that desktop that we're just in. We're just going to log into that one. So now here we're again we are I'm on the same desktop that I was on before using Windows Remote Desktop. Now I'm using NoMachine's desktop. And again, you know, I'll just open up LibreOffice here. We can use it just like we would normally. And so on and so forth. So these are the two programs we're going to be using is Windows Remote Desktop and NoMachine. We're now going to go into ZeroTier. We're going to set it up so that we can now access that desktop that I went into from the laptop outside on the internet. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to that desktop that remote desktop that we went into. So this is the desktop that we used. Microsoft Remote Desktop and NoMachine to access. But right now what we're going to do is we are going to go to, and I've already typed it in here, but it's just zerotier.com, and we're going to go ahead and sign up here. So you're going to want to put your email in here, give yourself a username and password, and then just hit register. After you hit register, you're going to need to create a network. So we're going to go ahead, and what this has done here, it's created this network for us right here. This is our network ID, and this is going to become important. And so we're going to click on that. We're just going to change this. It will just come up with some generic name. And I'm just going to put Tech Made Easy, and then I'm just going to put demo here for my name. And then you're going to leave this as private. Now, if you're not familiar with IP addresses, I'll talk about those in a minute here. But normally, your home computer will have an IP address of, say, like down here, 192.168. .something. Okay, so I like to kind of choose. I like to stay in this 10 range because what ZeroTier does is it assigns an IP address to the different computers that you're going to remote into. And so I like to use the 10 just because once I see the 10, that I know it has nothing to do with my local area network inside my house. And so you can just choose any of these here. And sometimes it'll be on one of these here. It just depends on when you come into here. You don't really need to go to advanced. This is all you need to know. but I would stick to any of these 10s in here. It just makes it easier. And I've heard both that you can have up to 50 or 100 different IP addresses for free. And I didn't mention that before, but ZeroTier is totally free until you get over. It's either over 50 or 100 IP addresses, which most home users aren't going to do that. That would be a business at that point. So all of these other options here, you don't have to worry about them, and that's what I like about this. Because you really don't need to worry about any of these. The only thing you need to choose here is your IP scheme, your IP address scheme. And so then what we're going to do here is so right here it says no devices have joined the network. So what we're going to do now is we're going to join devices to the network. And so I'm actually going to close out of this real quick. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're just going to go over here. Down at the bottom here, it shows you all of the different operating system that ZeroTier is compatible with. Okay, so we're just going to go to our download folder. We're going to go ahead and install ZeroTier, and it'll take just a minute to run through the install. Just let it do its thing. Okay, so it had a little window over here. Do you want to join the network? We can bring that window back up because I'm going to close this. Okay, so now that I'm finished installing all the way, it doesn't automatically put an icon down here to work with. So we have to go over here to the Start menu, and depending on your install, it's either going to show at the top here as a new app installed, or you'll have to go back down to the bottom. But at any rate, you're going to have to click on that and launch it. So after you've clicked on that, you can go over here, and ZeroTier is going to be right here. We need to log back into ZeroTier, and this is the network ID that we need. So we're just going to go ahead and copy this, and then we're going to go down here. We're going to click on this ZeroTier icon. We'll say Join Network, and now we're going to paste this network ID into here, and we're just going to say join. Now what we want to do in here, when this pops up here, you're going to want to hit yes. It creates a network interface for ZeroTier to work with. But you're going to want to click in here, and you're going to want to go down in here. So it says one device has joined the network, and that's the one that we just joined. So what we want to do here is we want to click on this box here, and you have to click on that box because then it will activate ZeroTier down here. It won't activate it until you click on this box. So any of these that you sign up for, you've got to click this box. And since this is my desktop, for right now, just to make this easy, I'm just going to write desktop on here, or type in desktop. You can put a description here if you want, but what it'll do, you have to wait 30 seconds to a minute, and now it has appeared here. So what you going to want to do is you're going to want to look at this here, and we'll look at this when we assign one to the laptop. If you've got -1, -1, -1, it hasn't assigned it yet, so just be patient. It'll show up, and it'll give you an IP address. So this basically is an IP address right here that it assigned to that. And you can change this if you want. I'm just going to leave that. If you want, you type the one here, but you have to use this 10.147.18, and then and then this X here is what you're going to make it. I'm not going to do that on this one. I'm fine with that network ID. But what I want to show here, if you've never looked to see what your network ID is, click in your search button here and just type in CMD, and that's your command prompt. And so what we're going to look at here really quick is we're going to do an IP config, and this will show you. And I should have showed you this before we went to ZeroTier, but this right here, this top one, this is actually the IP address of my desktop. This one right here, you're going to notice right here that this is the ZeroTier IP address that it just assigned to this computer. And this will make more sense. If you haven't worked with IPs before, all you have to know is you're going to be, when you're outside your office, you're going to be working with this IP address right here. So when we go from our laptop, when we want to access this computer here, we're going to use this IP address right here. So right now, let's switch over to our laptop. Okay, so now what we need to do here is we need to do the same thing. We need to go to ZeroTier, and I've already got it open here, because what we want to do here is we want to install the Windows. And I'm going to minimize this. We could have opened it up from the browser, but this way it'll just make it easier. So again, we're going to install this. We're going to let it do its thing. It'll take a minute for the whole thing to complete. I'm going to close this download folder down. So it says so it's just going to gather some information here, and we should be installed. So we're gonna go to our start menu here. Now it's going to show recently added up here. The reason why I didn't show it on the other desktop is I already had ZeroTier installed on that one, and I uninstalled it for the demo purposes. And so that's why I had to go clear down to the Z's to access it, which you would normally have to do. So what we're going to do here is we're going to click on ZeroTier. Now ZeroTier does not start up automatically when you restart your computer, but that is an option. That is an option in here. Is you can go to Preferences, and you can say Launch at Startup, and it'll launch at startup. So, but what we're going to do here now is we're going to go ahead and log into our ZeroTier. And again, what we need to do is we need to copy this network ID. So we're going to copy this, go back to ZeroTier, and it might seem like it's a lot of steps, but it's really not. You just do the same step on each computer that you want to access outside your network. And again, you only have to do this if you're going to try and access one of your computers from outside your home. So we're going to say join network, and we're going to go ahead and paste that network ID in here, and then we're going to click in here. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go down, and here's our laptop that we just added. So we're going to click this box. That'll activate it to make sure we can use it, and then I'm just going to put in here a laptop. And now, as you'll see here, it's given me an IP address. And if we wanted to, so in here, let's just make this a little easier. So what I can do here is I'm going to type in 10.147.118. And let's just make this 115. We're going to add this. And then what we're going to do is we're going to delete this one. And you don't have to change this IP address. I just think it's a little easier to remember than 102. And it'll take a minute for it to show up here, the physical address, but this is all you really need. So now it's finished assigning the physical IP. So now what we're going to do is, right now my laptop is on my local area network. So what I want to do though, and we already accessed my desktop from these two remote desktop, or from the two remote desktop software, Microsoft's and NoMachine. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and remove my laptop from my house network, And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my cellular phone's provider, and I'm going to turn my hotspot on, and we're going to go through my hotspot on my phone that's going through my cellular provider. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to disconnect this from my house, and then I'm going to connect to my Pixel phone. Okay, one thing that's really important on your laptop that you need to know, this is really a network setup, and I go over this in sharing files on a network. But your laptop, what you want to do, because sometimes it's not set on private, you're going to want to go here to Settings. So go to your Windows Start menu, hit Settings, and then what you're going to want to do over here is you're going to want to go to Network and Internet. And what we're going to want to see here is Properties. And you want to make sure that it's not on public. You need to make sure that it's on private. You need to be on a private network to do everything that we're doing here. So that's the most crucial thing. And again, I show how when you're sharing files, and when we're setting up the remote desktop on a local area network in your house, I go over all that. But that's one thing that's really important. And I'll have links to both the remote desktop, where I go over Windows Remote Desktop and NoMachine, and also file sharing, so that you can watch those. Again, this is all we're doing here is just getting this set up to remote in. So now what we want to do here, though, is that this is why we're creating these IP addresses. These IP addresses are not located on my local area network. These are located at ZeroTier. What ZeroTier does is this number right here, which you can't see really well because it's kind of small, this is your network card MAC address. And so what it does, it assigns this, ZeroTier assigns it a number. And so then it goes out and finds your MAC address, and it's all, you don't have to set up your router. That's what's nice about this, and I should have mentioned that earlier, is that you don't have to do anything with your router. Everything is done by ZeroTier, and it's all encrypted. So now what we're going to do here is now so now on my laptop, I'm as if I'm outside of my house. Maybe I'm at a hotel or something. All I have to do here, if I'm using Windows Remote Desktop, what I'm going to have to do here, I cannot use my machine address. I have to use that IP address that ZeroTier assigned. And it was okay. One of the things I did have to do is I had to go back into here. And if you get any IP numbers below 10, put them above that. I believe that those are reserved, and so I couldn't connect. So I went ahead and changed this to .25, and then I was able to connect. But let's just go ahead and connect. So what you're going to do is you're going to want to put in the IP address of the you're going to want to put in the ZeroTier IP address that it assigned it to your desktop. And so then you're going to want to hit connect here. And because I've already connected through this, it already knows my username here. If I wanted to, if I was using a different username, I could change that here. But I'm just using that same user. And then I'm going to put in my password here. And I don't want that. So this is a good sign. This means we're connected. We don't have to see that again. And so now we're going to go ahead and let it connect. And so now we're now connected to my desktop over the internet. So just like before, when I showed you this, when we were on our local area network, everything works the same as it did before. Again, because we're really just using the same way we did when we had the laptop at the house on our own network. We can make changes, save those. I'm not going to save this, obviously. Now, one thing I didn't show before is you can copy files back and forth between this desktop and your laptop over the internet. And so I'm just going to go into the file manager here, I'm going to grab a picture, and I have a home NAS here. I'm just going to grab this, and here's a picture here that I'm going to copy over. Now, just so you know, you can't drag and drop from one desktop, from a remote desktop to the laptop. I don't know why you can't do that. I kind of figured Microsoft would just make it so you could do it, but you can't skip desktops to copy, to drag and drop, but you can copy. So I just went ahead and copied that. So now I'm just going to paste it, and it'll just paste that picture over. You know, maybe there's a file that you want to manipulate a lot on your laptop that doesn't make sense doing it through the remote desktop. And that's the other thing I need to say. There are basically three things that affect your performance using remote desktop over the internet. First and most is your internet speed. So depending on how fast your internet is going to depend on how fast your remote desktop works. Second is your hardware, your laptop, the processor it has in it, the amount of RAM you have in it, and even if you have an older one that maybe has an older Wi-Fi card in it, all those things can affect your performance when you're doing remote desktop. So remote desktop is not the ideal, but it's a great way to access your computer at your house if you need to do that. Again, and you can work on some maps on there as well, so on and so forth. But anyway, we've already seen this, so we're just going to go again connect with NoMachine. Oh, and I don't know if I opened this picture up, but it's just a picture of my kids and I skiing. Great mountain view there. And so I'm going to put this in the trash because we're going to go to NoMachine. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to NoMachine. And we're going to copy that same file over. And so what we're going to do here, though, is now this is my home desktop that we've been remoting into from this laptop. Now, I'm just, oh, whoops, I don't want to do that yet. One thing that this does is that unlike Microsoft's remote desktop, it allows you to put in the new IP address right at that front screen. Well, in this one here, you double click on this, it's going to just try and connect you right away. But it's going to use my local area network instead of the zero tier. So you can just go ahead and edit this. Now, I already logged in using ZeroTier's IP address that I assigned to that computer, so it's sitting here. But if for some reason you go in here and you toggle down here and it's not there, what you can do is you go ahead and add a connection here, and you can just type in, I'm just going to say home desktop, and then just type in the IP address like you did before, and we're just going to hit connect, and it'll automatically save that. So it'll save that as an option, as a connection now right here. So now we're just going to go ahead and put in our user. Now, because this is going to be the first time I'm logging in, because I just created a new connection, NoMachine, when the first time you log in, it'll show you a whole bunch of how to get to a whole bunch of settings. I don't need those to show anymore, so I'm just going to make it so they don't show. So if we go back in, all this stuff isn't going to show up. So now I need to log in to my Windows machine. Microsoft automatically logs you in. NoMachine doesn't, so you'll have to log into NoMachine, then you'll have to log into your desktop once you connect. Okay, so I left this file manager open. I'm just going to minimize it for a sec. Again, like we did before, went into LibreOffice, manipulate our document just like we did with Windows Desktop. Now, I will say this about Windows Desktop, and I might have mentioned this before if I hadn't. Microsoft Windows Remote Desktop it's very good at the graphic display over remote desktop. NoMachine isn't quite as good as Microsoft, but we're using NoMachine here because Windows 10 Home doesn't have the ability to remote desktop. If you're using a Mac or if you go into a Linux machine, any of those other operating systems, then you need something other than remote desktop. Now there is a remote desktop Linux app, you could say, where you can use Windows Remote Desktop and Remote Desktop into a Linux box, but that remote desktop does not work as good. And so NoMachine works way better than that Linux. Again, that Linux one isn't developed by Microsoft. It's just somebody made an open source program. But right now we're just on Windows. We're going to go to Linux here in a minute with NoMachine. So basically, I'm just going to go ahead and bring that file manager up. Now the difference here is that this screen shrinks. But I can go ahead, instead of it keeping all the icons the same size, it does shrink down. That might be an advantage, a disadvantage between Microsoft Remote Desktop and this one, I don't know. But anyway, the amazing thing is we can drag and drop this from one desktop to another desktop using Remote Desktop over the internet. And so instead of doing a copy and paste, which is not a big deal if you have to do copy and paste. I don't think it's a big deal, but I'm just surprised that Microsoft's Remote Desktop doesn't allow you to drag and drop files onto your desktop that you're using on the internet. So, all right, so now we're done with that. And like I said, we've already been into this, so I'm just going to close this. I'll close that, and again, here's our picture again. Let's open that real quick. Okay, so that's how easy it is. We've now remote desktop through the internet. Now what we want to do is we want to go to our Linux desktop and we want to install ZeroTier on our Linux desktop so we could access that. But it could also be a server where you have apps on the server you might want to access. Or you might want to SSH into that server. Anyway, so let's just go ahead, go to Linux, and let's get that installed in Linux, and then we'll go ahead and go to Linux from our laptop. Okay, so in Linux, you've got to go to the terminal. And so what you're going to do is you're going to do this command right here, but depending on which flavor of Linux you're using, curl is not installed. So on mine it's not installed. So I've got to go to the terminal, and I've got to install curl. And I'm just going to paste that command in here, put in my password. So now that curl's installed, what we need to do is we need to just copy this script here, put that in here, and it'll take a minute or two. It's just going to go through and install all the packets that it needs. Okay, once that's done, and one thing that I haven't really talked about, every time you install ZeroTier, it gives you this basically desktop ID number. And so I didn't explain that at first. I'll show you what that is. If you're just doing joining one at a time, then I don't really pay attention to that, but I'll show you what that is here in a minute. But now what we need to do, now that it's installed, we need to join the network. It doesn't give us a little fancy icon down here to do that like we have in Windows and then on the Mac. So all you need to do is type in sudo zerotier-cli join, and then this is your network ID. And that network ID, again, is this network ID that it creates when you set up the account. And so I've already put that in there, and so we just hit that, and now we're joined. So now if we go back into ZeroTier, now this is where this ID here is going to come into play. That's just like I said, that's the desktop ID. If we come into here, we should when we come down in here, it should show that my Linux desktop is joined, and here it is right here. So and this is that ID right there. If we go here, so that's the ID right there. And so every desktop that you install, it installs an ID for that desktop. So now we're just going to click this, and I'm just going to put Linux desktop here, and it'll take a minute for it to join. Okay, now it's assigned an IP address. I don't like this IP address, too long for me. So sorry the text is so small here, but I'm running in 4K mode on this Linux machine, and so I probably should have changed it before I started. So I'm just going to make it 20. So again, you just type in 10.147.18, and I'm typing in 20. We're going to add that, and then we're going to delete the one that it assigned. Okay, now if we go to our terminal, we type in IP address show. I don't like the way Linux shows IP addresses. It's a little confusing to me, to be honest. But here's my local area, because it's just because they bunch it all together. So here's my local IP address that's been assigned to my Linux desktop, and then here's my here's my ZeroTier IP address that we just assigned. This one right here. So now what I can do, now that this is assigned, let's go back over to the laptop. Okay, so now that we're over at my laptop, we can just hit NoMachine here, and here's my Linux desktop right here. Again, we're going to click on this, and we're just going to hit edit. And this is the local IP address, but now we're going to drop this down. Now we're going to drop this down, click on this, and we're going to hit connect. I'm going to put in my password. Oh, and I left it on the website, so here's my here's my desktop. And again, I go into LibreOffice here, do whatever I need to do on my Linux desktop, and so on and so forth. So now I've accessed both my Linux desktop, my Windows desktop using NoMachine, and this is how you can access your computer. Don't let the steps scare you. Even if you set up, like, say, Google's remote desktop, there are several steps involved with that too. But the reason why I like this program is that one thing I should mention here. This is for what we're doing here. This is very simple. What we're doing makes it real easy. But you can also, if you have a if you want to do a web server in your house, you can use one of these addresses here to do it instead of going to get a secure IP address. You can do that here. There's a lot of different options here. Like for me, I'm going to set up Nextcloud in my house, and so this is how I'm going to access it. I'm going to assign it I'm gonna go ahead and use the IP address from ZeroTier. That way I don't have to do any port forwarding in my house. It's just done.
Okay, if you made it through that whole video, one thing, my motto of my channel is to make things as easy as possible, affordable and practical. I know that this video was a little long, and part of the reason why it's long is because we were using 2 different desktops to show how to do that, and we also accessed Linux as well. So it made it a little bit more lengthy. Again, check out my video 1 that shows you how to use these. As far as the Mac goes, when you go onto the video, my part 1 of this series, when you're installing NoMachine, it installs the same on the Mac as it does, or it installs the same on Mac and Linux as it does in Windows. ZeroTier installs on the Mac just like it does in Windows. Linux is the only one that you have to, and probably Raspberry Pi, go to the command prompt or the terminal. But I hope that was helpful. Again, this is my favorite way to remote desktop to my house at my computer. Again, thanks for coming to the channel. This is TG with Tech Made Easy. Have a great day. Thanks.
Now that was easy